Good morning, all. Actually, it's afternoon. I guess 12:30. I'm 3 hours late for class, which doesn't happen on campus. Promise. So we're going to talk about intermittent fasting today. I've had a busy last couple of weeks with exams and writing exams and grading exams and putting scores in grade books, etc. So I apologize for not being on Monday. I was called in to teach at the high school. Had meetings this morning. So we're going to talk about intermittent fasting. Okay, so that's a spooky kind of idea, fasting, if I tell people to fast. And I tell them to do it all the time. So fasting is part of a health age management thing. I read in Jason Fung's book, The Obesity Code, earlier this year, which I'd been following him for a while and I'd never read the book, so I bought it and read it. Americans have gone from kind of a 3 meal a day country to about 10. And if you don't rest yourself from caloric intake, your body doesn't know what to do. So I think a better term for this is time-restricted eating. And this is kind of what I do when I health coach people. And this is not a weight loss class, although weight loss is one of the side effects of time-restricted eating. We're talking about age management and avoiding chronic illness. So I ran across an article from Scientific American that starts out talking about Charlotte's Web. So I'm just going to read this to you, and then we're going to get into the science of how intermittent fasting might help you live a longer and healthier life, which is the title of that article. So in Charlotte's Web, E.B. White's novel, there's an old sheep that advises the gluttonous rat Templeton that he would live longer if he ate less. And Templeton says, well, who wants to live forever? I get untold satisfaction from the pleasures of the feast. Great line. So it's easy to empathize with Templeton, but the sheep's claim really has some merit. So studies have shown that caloric reduction in consumption, usually by 30 to 40%, extends lifespan by a third or more in a significant number of animals. Well, that's not necessarily true in human beings, but there is a fair amount of mice studies that have been done, and fruit flies, nematodes, rodents, etc., that show that that's true. They live longer. There's also been studies that show that caloric restriction does not extend average lifespan. So it's important, I think, to talk about the difference between time-restricted eating and caloric restriction. So most people have difficulty, and like I said, this isn't about weight loss. It's not just about weight loss, although a lot of people talk to me about that. So like I said, weight loss is one of the side effects. So time-restricted eating sounds better than don't eat that. And you know I'm going to tell you not to eat simple carbs, no matter what time that you're eating. So time-restricted eating has a little bit, it's a little bit easier to comprehend. It doesn't sound quite as restrictive and punitive as caloric restriction. And in fact, when I health coach people that are trying to lose weight, I tell them not to count calories and not to weigh themselves. Most of it has to do with intermittent fasting, and I think probably, like I said, the better term is time-restricted eating. Okay, so the scientific article goes on, if you could claim the benefits of decreasing chronic disease as you get older from caloric restriction, and it's not restriction, you're reducing your calories sort of in a natural way just based on your timing. So if you could claim those benefits without being hungry, that would be the ideal. And intermittent fasting is showing promise in being able to do that. So intermittent fasting really includes everything from multi-day fasts, so there are people that fast for 3, 4, 5 days at a time, or skipping a meal or two on certain days of the week, you still may get the health benefits from intermittent fasting, as opposed to uninterrupted caloric ingestion. Okay? So the idea of intermittent fasting is a little bit more palatable to your ear, so you don't have to renounce the pleasures of the feast like Templeton talks about. Okay? And in fact, you've heard me talking about Jason Fung before in the obesity code. He doesn't restrict anything except carbs. So he tells you eat, take 20 minutes to eat, because it takes your gut hormones 20 minutes to tell your brain that you're full. So slow down, take 20 to 25 to 30 minutes to eat, and then stop eating when you're full. You don't have to really count calories, you just eat. Okay, what you shouldn't eat is simple carbs. Okay, so this intermittent fasting thing goes all the way back into the early 1900s. I shared with you, I think in May, about a guy that was told, I can't remember his name, a guy that was told if you keep doing what you're doing, eating the way you're eating, you're going to die. He was 64. He lived to be 87, and all he did was change his lifestyle eating pattern, got rid of simple carbohydrates, and he would only eat at certain times of the day. The rest of the time he drank water. Okay, so he was like, he had fatty liver disease and hypertension, he was obese. He naturally lost weight and lived, another 23 years after his doctor told him, this is in the 1880s, I think, after his doctor told him, if you keep eating and the lifestyle that you're doing, you're just pretty much going to die. Okay? So there were some caloric restriction studies that happened in the 1930s that were based on rats. I won't go through all the yucky stuff about rats and science and all that, but anti-aging eating dietary modification kind of took a back seat to more medical advanced influences like antibiotics, coronary artery bypass surgery, or coronary artery bypass surgery. But then, more recently, that research has kind of taken on more legs, I guess. So you've heard about intermittent fasting, I'm sure. It's if you would combine time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting with the Atkins diet, which is a high-fat, low-carb diet, you kind of get the idea of where I'm going. So simple sugars, if you just give what these mice studies showed, if you just give unlimited access of food to mice in this study, they developed insulin resistance, and that's the harbinger of type 2 diabetes. If you restrict their food intake to 8 hours, those mice lose weight, so do people. And so if you're eating 10 times a day, we're talking about, okay, breakfast and then lunch, but you have a 10 o'clock snack, you have a 2 o'clock snack, then you have a prior to dinner snack, and then dinner, and then you have some snacks, and then you have a little snack at 10 o'clock before you go to bed. Over time, you've never let your body convert into a fat-burning mode. So the science behind this is pretty valid. We just talked about it in physiology yesterday, specifically about brain neurotrophic factor, which increases with people that have restricted time eating periods, or even restricted caloric intake. So you can ward off some of the problems with Alzheimer's disease and dementia just by changing when you eat. So it's not caloric restriction, that's the important part, it's timing. This is all about timing. So all intermittent fasting methods are based on the same idea. So if you reduce caloric intake, your body will use its stored fat for energy. So that's the hidden behind the scenes reason for that. But what makes intermittent fasting different from simply cutting calories is the possibility that it's easier for people to restrict calories for limited stretches of time rather than for days and weeks and months. So if I told you, okay, well, you need to go on a 1,000 calorie diet for the next 6 months in order to lose weight or feel better, that's harder for me to say than me saying to you, I want you to eat all of your food within a window of 6 to 8 hours a day. When I lost weight 2.5 years ago, so my blood pressure was out of control. I'd lost weight from 205 to 163 when I was 50. So 2 years ago I was 58. I decided, okay, I'm going to go on an intermittent fast. So I ate one meal a day. The rest of the time I drank water. I lost 22 pounds in 2 months. I still had to take meds for blood pressure, but I did lose 22 pounds, and I've maintained that. So I've stayed about 170 pounds, between 170 and 175, which is what I weighed in my 40s, and that's kind of my goal weight, is 170 to 175. That's how I feel the best. So time-restricted eating means you consume all of your calories for a day within an 8 to 12 hour window. I did it in a 1 hour window. So I would feast 1 hour a day, and I would spend that 1 hour eating until I was full. It never took an hour. It was usually 30 minutes, and when I was full, I quit eating. And then the rest of the time, I drank water. I did have coffee. If you put cream and even sugar substitutes in coffee the next morning, then you're going to trigger your pancreas to try to wake up, and that's going to change your blood sugar. So, for instance, let's say you start your day with a cup of coffee at 7 in the morning. You eventually wind down with maybe popcorn and an adult beverage at 11 p.m. So you've been feeding yourself from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. So with time-restricted eating, you might switch to eating breakfast at 8 o'clock, finish your dinner by 6 p.m., and you have all of your meals eaten, all of your caloric intake, in a 10-hour window. And you're not going to snack late at night. You can pretty much eat for those 10 hours. Although it's better, I mean, if you want 3 meals a day, you eat it, you just get it all done within 8 to 12 hours. I did it in 1 hour and then fasted for 23 hours a day. So this seems to do more for your body than just simply reducing calories. Okay, so there was a 2012 study done on mice, and now they're doing studies on human beings as well. And so if you give mice the same exact amount of food, but let the mice eat for one group eat for 24 hours and one group only eat for 8 hours, what happens is the mice that eat whenever they want develop insulin resistance, and they started developing liver damage. Okay, so this study is repeated, and even if you take the mice that were unrestricted, could eat whenever they wanted, if you put them on a time-restricted diet, the insulin resistance and the liver damage went away. Okay. Also involved with this scientifically is circadian rhythm. So you know that your circadian rhythm has to do with the sunset and the sunrise. So most of us know getting sunlight in the early morning is beneficial to your mood. And then if you expose yourself to cell phone lights, blue lights, and laptops and televisions and all that, it tends to disrupt your sleep at night. So if you're doing that after 9 o'clock, I wrote a whole article about insomnia and the effect of blue light on sleep patterns. Okay, so even if you eat healthy food at the wrong time, your body kind of looks at it or metabolizes it like junk food. So you don't need it. So you're eating, but your body doesn't need it. So what happens is if you time restrict your eating, you give your body more time to use up fat. So when you eat, you use carbohydrates for energy, And if you don't need the carbohydrates immediately, let's say you eat some carbohydrates and you go work out strenuously for 30 to 60 minutes, you'll use them. If you don't need them, they get stored in the liver as glycogen, or they get converted into fat. Okay, and after you've finished eating for the day, your body continues to run on glucose from the carbohydrates that you've eaten maybe a few hours before, and then after that, tapping into stored carbohydrates or glycogen in the liver. Okay, so the glycogen lasts for several hours before running out about 8 hours after you've stopped eating, which is when your body taps into stored fat. Okay, so when you shorten the eating window, extend your fasting window, you spend more time in a fat-burning mode of metabolism. Again, once you almost immediately when you ingest food again, even if it's coffee with sugar and milk, you switch back into the other mode and you start burning carbohydrates and then storing glycogen and fat if you don't need it. Okay? So the idea really is to get yourself into how do I want to say this? Autophagy is what you're after, where you're actually burning stored fat. You're mobilizing fat that you've stored, and then there's help for doing that with methionine, inositol, choline, arginine, chromium, L-carnitine, vitamin B complex. All that will help you. Even HCG will help you mobilize that fat into your bloodstream so that you can burn it. And that takes about 8 hours before you start not using what you've eaten for energy and you start using what you've stored. So think about a checking account versus a savings account. I've talked to you about that before. So stored fat is like your savings account. It's harder to get money out of your savings account than it is your checking account. It's harder to get glucose and fat out. It's harder to get glucose out of stored fat than it is to use glucose in whatever you've put in your mouth and swallowed and eaten. Okay, so that's a preliminary look, some science behind why time-restricted eating has some pretty good health benefits. So you're reducing your risk of insulin resistance, reducing your risk of type 2 diabetes, reducing your risk of chronic illnesses. You're reducing your risk of Alzheimer's disease because of the brain neurotrophic factors that are produced. And basically, when I've done it, I've been fairly energetic. I don't lose my energy. If I'm eating one meal a day, I'm as energetic as any other day that when I was younger, I guess. The HCG diet, where I was down to a 500 calorie diet, I was totally energetic. So I was eating 500 calories a day, twice a day in about an 8-hour window. So that kind of fits along with this. It's the caloric restriction that bugs everybody. Time restriction is easier to do. And most hunger is thirst. So if you're hungry, you drink some water or some bone broth. That's allowed as well. I do have some new protein shakes coming out that I developed. They should be in stock within a couple of weeks, I'm thinking. We've been working on this for 3 or 4 months. I guess since the end of June, this is the end of October, so about 4 months. And I'll update you on those once those are available. They're pretty close to being in production. So I will talk to you Friday. This is Wednesday. I skipped Monday because I was teaching, and then I was tired when I got home. So I'll come up with something interesting on Friday. Might expand on the intermittent fasting and time-restricted diet and some of the science behind that. And hope you have a great Wednesday afternoon. It's nice and fall and cold here in Missouri, but it's supposed to be 83 degrees tomorrow. I don't know how that works. And then the cold front comes in next week. So have a great day. I'll talk to you Friday. See ya. Bye.